You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Joining me on the show today, guest co-host Jonathan Tannenwald of Philly.com. Jonathan, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Got on the phone at 10:59 and 35 seconds
Exactly.
for an 11 o'clock show, which is pretty good.
Hey, it's actually 20 seconds to spare, more than usual. So that's perfect. You know, it was a great weekend in soccer, not just in North America, in Europe as well. We'll talk later on in the last segment about the Bundesliga. But let's start off with, there's one playoff team already confirmed, and Toronto of all teams, Jonathan.
I'm not surprised. They're really good. And I know that there are some folks in Toronto who don't want to hear that or can't believe it or think that it would all fall apart. But they're really good, and they proved it over the weekend, coming from behind to draw the New York Red Bulls 3-3. That was a big game for both teams, and I think TFC really made a statement. Josie Altidore in particular made a statement. He had a terrific game, didn't he?
Oh, no, what a great game. But another player who had a great game on that night, Bradley Wright Phillips, who is the first ever two-season 20 goals scorer. My question is, Jonathan, what does it say about the league that over 20 years, only one player have amassed two seasons of more than 20 goals?
I think that what it says is that if you're a good young striker in Major League Soccer, you're not going to be a good young striker in Major League Soccer for very long because somebody's going to come along and buy you. And that's probably the way it should be.
True.
And if you're going to come here as a veteran and score a lot of goals, as Robbie Keane has done and David Villa has done, that's probably how you're going to get to a mark like that. Either you're going to be a veteran who still has enough to be a force in this league, and obviously we have seen that the bar for sort of what constitutes a veteran, you know, the age keeps coming down of the star players that come over from Europe, and I think that's a very good thing. We all think that's a very good thing. Or you're going to be, you know, basically Chris Wondolowski, where you're a very good player and you're a veteran serviceable player and you're the top striker for your team, but you're not the quality of player who's like Josie Altidore is one of the most prominent examples. Juan Agudelo is another, who, when you're good and you're good at a young age like that, yes, you're going to get sold to Europe, and you should get sold to Europe, and you should get sold to Europe for a lot of money.
Speaking of a lot of money, Landon Donovan has finally opened. Well, it took only 2 weeks for him to score for the Galaxy after his comeback from retirement. We didn't have you on the show since his announcement of coming out of retirement. What do you think of Landon Donovan's future with the team this year? What is he going to bring? Why is he there? The actual reasons. What's your take on it?
I cannot get it out of my head that he is there because Gyasi Zardes is injured more than anything. Because when Donovan retired, Zardes had to step into the hole that Donovan left. And now, sort of karmically, Zardes is injured and Donovan has to step into the hole that Zardes left. I wasn't really fond of it. I'm still not entirely. I think that the Galaxy needed Donovan more than they've maybe been willing to admit. And perhaps even more. And Donovan said this himself in the post that he wrote on his Facebook page. It sure seems that the Galaxy needed Donovan more than Donovan needed the Galaxy. But I'd say two things about the goal he scored on Sunday. One is, do not taunt him. Please, do not taunt him. Because it will come back to bite you, as it has come back to bite a lot of people over the years. And secondly, if you watch that goal and you watch the trailing run that he made, behind the play after he passed it forward. Nobody on Kansas City's defense was anywhere near him. And that is inexcusable. It's inexcusable for anybody, but it's inexcusable when you're even though Donovan is, old and a little out of shape. He is far too smart to not know exactly where to move in that situation. And you watch his movement off the ball, and to the letter, he did it perfectly.
And that raises a question. If he finds himself enjoying the rest of this season with the Galaxy, finding his marks, getting results, who knows? It's getting close to Galaxy time.
I know where you're going, and I can't see it.
The next year, it's not coming back?
No. Zardes will be back, hopefully, and the Galaxy will go out. Steven Gerrard's probably going to retire. Robbie Keane might retire. The Galaxy will go out and sign some other players. And, Gio dos Santos is a pretty darn good player, too. And he is starting to show now that he is willing and able to step up and really carry the Galaxy's attack more than anybody else. And if he stars in Major League Soccer, that will do more for the league than almost anybody else possibly could, Didier Drogba and David Villa included, because it will draw more big-name Mexican players to the league, and the league really needs that.
No, yeah, absolutely. It would be very great. Speaking of teams that need players, need goals, the Vancouver Whitecaps fell 1-0 to Seattle in the derby this weekend. Jordan Moore's magic late in the game with Nicolas Lodero. How impressive has Lodero been for you since he joined the Seattle Sounders?
He's been very good, and he has made a point of fitting in. It was a great story in the Seattle Times over the weekend by Matt Pence. I would recommend the listeners go out, go to the soccer page at seattletimes.com and give it a look, about Lodero's character and how he has wanted to not, overtake the locker room. And if he can develop a chemistry with Jordan Morris, boy, the Sounders are going to be good. Now, Morris has to finish all those chances, and he hasn't always. But if he finishes one a game, that's usually going to help a good bit. Vancouver's done. Yeah. It's very disappointing to say that because I like Carl Robinson, their head coach, a lot. I know you might look at the standings and say, well, they're 2 games back of Sporting Kansas City with 4 to play. But Seattle has 2 games in hand. And I have a hunch that Seattle's going to make it in. I'm a little bit convinced that Sporting Kansas City won't. We'll see. I think this playoff race is going to be fascinating, and there are a lot of twists and turns left to go in this thing, which is part of why I enjoy the league so much.
No, exactly. After the break, which will be in a few minutes, we'll talk about the Eastern Conference. But when we look at the league right now, one thing that comes to mind is it's been hinted over the last few days of a Canadian announcement regarding MLS before the end of the year. Don Garber alluded to it 2 weeks ago when I asked him the question, and it's been alluded since.
Do you take calls on this show?
No, not today.
Okay, because I believe that is Duane's specific area of expertise, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, but
and it is. I will say this about the Canadian League and the Canadians as domestics thing. I've said it on this show many times before, and it's especially true now when I think it's getting to the point that Victor Montopoli and Peter Montagliani. That was impressive, wasn't it? Victor Montagliani and Peter Montopoli, who were the top executives of the Canadian Soccer Association, need to spit it out now and put it on the table. Whether it's Canadians as domestics, the Canadian Premier League, all of it. And here, as I've said many times on this show, is why. The 3 Canadian MLS teams are popular. And that's a problem for us, Kevin, isn't it? When, soccer is the hipster sport and so forth.
Yeah.
They're popular in their markets. And I know the TV ratings aren't what people have hoped that they would be. I'm as disappointed by that as anybody else. Obviously, if Toronto and Montreal make the playoffs, that will help a lot. Yeah. But it is sure hard to ignore when the Impact are selling out Stade Saputo, even though they aren't playing all that well right now.
Yeah.
And TFC is drawing enormous crowds to BMO Field. How can you ignore that forever?
Basically that, and the media coverage as well. One thing Don Garber alluded to a few weeks ago when he was in Montreal, we were about 50 surrounding Don Garber for the press conference.
I've said this many times to folks down here. It's true of all the Canadian teams, really, that those of us down here look at how much how much attention the Canadian teams get, how much of a spotlight they're in. And it is a model that we hold up for the American teams down here of saying, hey, this is what it can be like. And it is absolutely true that Montreal is at the top of the heap in that regard.
Just yesterday.
And it wasn't always that way.
Oh, no. I remember just 2 years ago, Jonathan, being like 4 people at the end of a game for press comments,
You and I have, and you and I and all of our colleagues who do podcasts about soccer in Montreal and all of our predecessors who did them have watched this for years and known that this was possible. And what I've said all along to you, to Sofiane Benzaza, to Phil Germain, to Giovanni Sardo, every single one of them, I've said Montreal wants a winner more than anything else. Obviously, Drogba has helped. And as your listeners know, because I wrote about it last year during the playoffs, already at that point in time, with a year to go on Didier Drogba's contract, they knew they already had to start looking ahead to when Drogba wasn't going to be there anymore and how they would keep the attention and how they would keep the fan base. But they've got it now, and they've established themselves as the second most prominent sports team in the city. They've done so many things right, and I think they're going to be able to stay there for a while.
It surely does look that way. All right, let's take the break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Eastern Conference on the pitch with a very interesting result in the weekend in the Eastern Conference.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The New England Revolution came to Stade Saputo Saturday, Jonathan, needing a result. Montreal needed a result to go back to the same conversation as Philly. New England got that victory and is sitting right now above that red line.
I can't figure out why it is that the Impact play so much worse at home than they do on the road. I don't get it. Because so often in this league, teams play so much better at home. The Impact are the complete opposite. I cannot figure it out. And now New England's in 6th. And look, the Impact are going to make the playoffs. I really genuinely believe that. It's getting close, but I think they will be there in the end.
There seem to be 3 tiers of team in the Eastern Conference.
That's right.
We have Toronto, New York's. I see New York's because I included 2 of them. So
exactly.
In the top 3, you got Philly almost in an island of its own, and Montreal, which had the opportunity to go with the same class of Philly, but because of that loss, now are in the conversation of 4 teams, 2 spots.
I think Philadelphia and Montreal are playing for 4th. Philly could jump up a little bit, especially with the games they have left. I think Philly and Montreal are playing for 4th. And DC, Orlando, and now New England are playing for 6th. Now, consider what is coming. The game, first of all, for the folks who don't know, Orlando got smoked at home by Columbus on Saturday, 4-1. That was a really astonishing result that nobody saw coming.
It's like nobody wants to make the playoff in the Eastern Conference. They all lose.
Well, nobody wants to make the playoffs anywhere in Major League Soccer. That much is for sure. Toronto FC and the Red Bulls do. And New York City FC does.
Yeah.
New York City FC drew with FC Dallas, which obviously is a really good team. And probably the best, and I mean, they are on points the best team in the league, but I think by acclamation, they're the best team in the league. Look at the games that are coming this coming weekend. Friday, New York City FC against Chicago at Yankee Stadium. New York City has not yet beaten Chicago this year. Chicago, the worst team in all of Major League Soccer at the moment. And then NYCFC drew with them, and then, they lost in Chicago in the opening week of the season. Then the teams drew in New York in May. So they play for the 3rd time on Friday. Then, Toronto, Philadelphia, the Red Bulls in Montreal at Red Bull Arena, and DC and Orlando in Washington. And that Toronto-Philly games at BMO Field. That's a sensational set of games.
Oh, it's crazy. It's anything can happen if DC United beats Orlando and Orlando's in a little bit of a skid, while DC United may have a claim to that spot. But same for example, another team that can do the same is I was going to mention New England. They go against Columbus, a team that has a lot of history with the Kai Kamara situation. Kai Kamara's returned to Columbus. What if New England continues on their winning streak, 3 in a row now?
The thing will get very interesting, but I would ask the opposite question. What if Columbus wins that game?
Then New England's becomes back where they were just a week ago.
Yeah, and Columbus isn't out of it.
True. That's
New England has to win. Put aside the impact, the effect that a New England win would have on Montreal and DC and Orlando for a minute. New England has to win this game and put Columbus out of the playoff race. That's what that game's about to me.
True.
And then figure out the rest later.
What did the draw? Would a draw be beneficial for the teams?
Well,
like
and by the way,
Montreal?
Columbus has 2 games in hand.
On
New England at
Yep.
least. Columbus 28 played. Orlando 29, DC 29, New England 30, Montreal 29, Toronto 29, and all the rest of the teams in the playoff places 30. So, as I said, New England has to win this game and put Columbus out. To the same way that, Chicago is for all intents and purposes out.
Yeah.
But New York has to win that game and put Chicago out and be done with it.
The only team that is not out for sure is Toronto. A great game against the Red Bull at BMO Field last night. 3-3. It was a very entertaining game where the Red Bulls took the 3-1 lead. Oh, it was tremendous.
And I don't know how many people watched up there.
There was some World Cup of hockey going on.
Well, and they moved the time of the game to accommodate U.S. television. And I know that some folks in Toronto grumbled about that. But I will say that it sure seemed to work down here. The early ratings for the 5 o'clock kickoff game, which was televised on Fox over the air as sort of a package deal with their NFL coverage. So about 65% of the country saw the game. The early word is it may end up being the most watched game of the year in MLS to date.
And it was a great game for that. It was very exciting. 3-1 to 3-3. Toronto came back with a great free kick goal by Josie Altidore. Then a great hold up. He took the ball, got a chance, and finished it for the equalizer. But Bradley Wright Phillips, before that, scored 2 great goals as well. Maybe the 2 most informed player in Major League Soccer, Altidore and Bradley Wright Phillips. Well,
we talked about Vancouver earlier, and I was out there when they played the Red Bulls, and there's been so much discussion on this show about Vancouver needing to open up the checkbook and go sign a big money striker. And yet we are reminded constantly by the likes of Bradley Wright Phillips that if you do this smartly and do it right, you don't have to spend $5 million. And it's a matter of intelligence, and it's a matter of if Carl Robinson sees a guy, 2 things have to happen. 1, the board has to let him sign that guy. And 2, if that guy fits in, I've said to a few folks this year that I think Masato Kudo has been one of the most disappointing players in MLS this season, because I really thought that he was going to come in and get the job done for the Whitecaps, and he hasn't. And I don't know what is going to happen as a result of that. But the next guy, whoever it may be, Vancouver really needs to get it right, because I think Carl Robinson is a great coach. I know a lot of people in Vancouver who think that Carl Robinson is a great coach, but I don't know how much longer he's going to end up sticking around there if they don't start winning more.
No, exactly. Vancouver, like all Canadian team, has not been the most patient markets for a head coach in Major League Soccer. We've seen this for many, many, many years. New York City FC against Dallas, a 2-2. New York City FC had a great start to the year. We're able to stay there. They were a great camp. Well, the start of the year wasn't that great, but Vieira was able to turn things around very quickly. Coach of the year candidate Patrick Vieira.
Oh, I think he's going to win it.
Yeah, he has to. But what does that game say about New York City FC? Like, they had to get more than just 1 point if they want to go into the conversation of top of the East, getting that first or second spot to have a bye. they got only a draw against Dallas. Yes, Dallas is a good team, but it's an opportunity missed. So does it say anything about NYCFC?
No, I don't think so yet. City and the Red Bulls are dead even right now. Wins, points per game, games played, wins, losses, draws. That tiebreaker then goes to goal difference, which the Red Bulls have by a lot. And wouldn't it be ironic if the goal difference that gives New York the bye, say they finish with the same record at the end of the season, same goal difference. No, sorry, same record, same points per game, all of that. The next tiebreaker is goal difference. Wouldn't it be ironic if that goal difference was 7 at the end of the day?
There's a possibility because right now it's 12 for New York in the positive and -1 for NYCFC. So how many goals NYCFC can score without conceding? It will probably be close to 7.
Well, we will see. The Red Bulls, I'm looking up their schedule right now. I know they have 2 games. They have 2 games coming up against Philly, which are going to be just ridiculous. So they play, here we go. Host Montreal on Saturday. Then midweek, they go down to Guatemala to play in the CONCACAF Champions League. Then they play Philly at home, take the bye week for the international window, play Columbus at home, and then go to Philly on the last day of the season. The Union, meanwhile, they go to Toronto this weekend. Then they go to New York. Then the international break. Then their last 2 games are at home against Orlando and the Red Bulls. That's going to be wild.
That's going to be wild. Speaking of wild, Philadelphia Union stayed close to the top of the East the entire season. They began the season just like Leicester in the Premier League last year, on top, surprised by everybody, but reality got back to them. How do you see Philadelphia's season so far, 30 games in? And are you surprised? Are you happy or disappointed because of how the season went? And you would have had higher expectations because they were first for a long time.
I did not have higher expectations. I rarely have high expectations in the first year of any general manager's tenure. You know, unless you're throwing enormous amounts of money around to go out and buy a David Villa or somebody like that. I think they're in an okay place right now. You know, what really hurt them was not beating Montreal at home. Those 2 drop points hurt a lot. If they had them in the bag, you'd feel much more comfortable about them losing in Portland. And you'd feel much more comfortable about them finishing 3rd or 4th and getting a home game in the playoffs, which they so desperately need to get any amount of attention in the city. I think they will get there in the end, probably as the 4th place team. They could certainly do with a draw in Toronto on Saturday. I don't think they'll get it, especially if Sebastian Giovinco is back. And that will only raise the pressure to, in turn, get a draw at Red Bull Arena and then to win the last 2 games of the season. And I just don't know what's going to happen. I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't know where they'll end up.
And on top of the result this season, it was a tumultuous season for Philadelphia Union. The Vincent Nogueira situation, the Letou situation. How did the team, was it affected by those departures? And were those players replaced enough to have more depth than it will be necessary?
Well, Nogueira wasn't replaced until Alejandro Bedoya came in. And that was a pretty big gap of time that they lost. Letou, I know he's all the most popular guy in Union history and so on and so forth. He wasn't that good by the time he got traded to Colorado. He just wasn't. And it was time for him to go, and he went. And they've got players in Fabian Herbers and Ilsinho and others who can play on that right side of midfield and be just fine. So that one I'm not too worried about.
All right. No, it's if I can have your final thoughts on the Eastern Conference, Jonathan. We have Toronto that clinched, and apparently FC Dallas clinched as well. There was some miscalculation by the league. So we have right now, as it stands, it might change later, Toronto and FC Dallas with the next to their name on the standings. We'll see if it stays that way throughout the rest of the day. A lot of people are with their calculator as we speak. But when you look at the Eastern Conference,
well,
who do
Dallas
you think
is going to the playoffs.
Well, yeah, Dallas for sure, but it's just semantics here at this point. When you're looking at Toronto and the 2 New York, who will get top of the East? And is there any chance that a team in the Eastern Conference challenges Dallas for the Supporters' Shield?
Well, if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be Toronto that challenges Dallas for the Supporters' Shield. And I think the biggest reason why is that Toronto has so many home games left. That's, I think Dallas will win the thing. I mean, Dallas has 2 home games left in the league too, against LA and Seattle. And that's huge to have those 2 games on your home field. And they go to LA on the last day of the season. I think Dallas will have done enough to win the Supporter Shield by the time all is said and done. And I don't know what's going to happen in the playoffs. Look, they're a great team. They are in so many ways the model for what a lot of people in MLS want to see MLS teams be. They develop young, local, skilled players, and they play them, and they win. It takes a really seriously deep philosophy to be willing to do that and take the risk that comes with it. But they've done it. And it is unfortunate that they do all these things right. And they sell the players too, as they sold Alejandro Zendejas to Chivas Guadalajara over the objections of a lot of people who didn't want to see one of the top U.S. youth national team prospects go to a club that requires you to renounce any other citizenship and play for Mexico in order to be on its roster. But Dallas is willing to do that. So they're doing a lot of things right, but nobody cares about them beyond the hardcore in the league. And it's disappointing because they're a really fun team to watch. And as I said, they're doing a lot of things right.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll touch on that Dallas situation and why the crowds are not necessarily filling in the stadium at the same rate as they are filling in the goal of the opposite team. You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. And you can help support the show. Go to patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network. $1 a month is all we ask, and it helps us give you even more. Jonathan, FC Dallas, I wouldn't say attendance woes, but maybe disappointment in the attendance considering the type of team they are.
I disagree with that, actually.
All right.
I think the crowds at games have been good enough. It's the rest of MLS and the rest of the soccer community in North America that isn't paying as much attention as I think they should.
Because there's one aspect to FC Dallas that people don't think about. The stadium is not a city setting. It's a little bit outside of the city. It's
Way
like
outside the city.
Well, yeah. To
And
people who haven't been there,
one
yeah.
entire end zone of it is shut off right now because they're building the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame in that part of the stadium. So they're not selling. They've got a quarter of the seats tarped over because of construction. So I'm not worried about attendance per se.
But what isn't it sexy about Dallas? Because for us who like development, who are soccer geek, we like to look at how they took their academy, and that happened before Oscar Pereira came back and coached Dallas. We're talking about it's been a 5 to 10 year process to get those academy players, one of the best academy in the league, but are able to graduate so many players at the same time, same rate, and like you mentioned, willing to take the risk. If you just look at this season, the small blimp that they do have, they have 8 losses. Some of those losses were 5-0, 3-0, 4-0. When it rains, it pours at Dallas, literally, figuratively, but they were able to get the results whenever they can and just forget about games. And that's one aspect of a professional athlete that sometimes we don't anticipate. When they're young, it's hard to forget bad performances. And for Dallas, it seems easy to forget for them.
Yeah, they are carrying the burdens of their past to a certain degree in terms of, low crowds and things like that. They don't have a big-time U.S. national team or other national team star. They have a really great playmaker in Mauro Diaz, but he doesn't get the amount of recognition that other players do. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. Winning the Open Cup helped. Winning the MLS Cup, if they can do it, will really help. I guess it's on the rest of us. I don't know.
No, exactly. So in the Western Conference, one team that has fascinated me throughout this season is the Colorado Rapids. The pre-Tim Howard era, so I will call it, to no disrespect to Zach, I like to call it the Zach McMath era because he's been forgotten since then, but Zach McMath has
been forgotten many times.
Yes, happened in Philly, happened in Colorado. He had this team with an over 2 points per game average for the first half of the season, literally putting this team in a no-win situation because, well, the only way you can objectively look at a success rate, it's the amount of points you get after games as wins. And even though Tim Howard did a lot of saves and even probably gave points to the Rapids that they would have lost, penalty saves and all that, he was not in a situation where he was able to keep the team to the level they were before he got there.
I don't know. It perplexes me. I mean, they're in third place right now. They've got a higher points per game than Los Angeles. They've got 2 games in hand on Los Angeles. They could well finish second, which I think would be perfectly respectable.
Without Jermaine Jones on top of it.
Right. I don't know. I think a little bit of his regression to the mean. I'm not yet inclined to blame Tim Howard, even if a lot of other people are. I want to see what they do in the playoffs. I think that's where we'll really find out what this team is about.
If you were a general manager, would you use one of your designated spot for a goalkeeper?
Probably not. Colorado's in a weird situation, though, because they didn't have a lot of money and just got hammered by their fan base, which is not all that huge, for not caring. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, much like Columbus did last year, here they are playing very well and proving again that it doesn't take too much to get an MLS team going in the right direction. As I said, the question is what they do in the playoffs. I am as interested as anybody to see how it turns out.
A few weeks ago, when we looked at the standing of the Western Conference, it was all up for grabs. A lot of teams were fighting for it. You had Seattle, Vancouver, and San Jose in just close, almost hands reach to the playoff spot. It changed over the last few weeks. Now you have a big gap between the 6th and the 7th spot, 5 points between Kansas City and Seattle. Are those 6 teams, Dallas, Galaxy, Rapids, Real Salt Lake, Portland, and Kansas City, assured of making the playoff? Is the race over in the Western Conference?
No. I don't think Seattle's out of it yet. I said earlier they got 2 games in hand on Kansas City, and I think that's going to be the battle for 6th when all is said and done. And when I talk about what Colorado can do in the playoffs and how that's going to be their proving ground, if right out of the gate the 3-6 game is Colorado-Seattle, then Colorado's really going to be on the spot. At home, which should help them because it's their fans, it's the altitude and all that, against a Sounders team that you would think would have some momentum going if they do get into 6th and has Ladero, Morris, Dempsey, and so forth.
If you go back, Jonathan, to 2015, at this exact same spot, one team was basically at the exact same level, Portland Timbers, and then went on a legendary run in the playoff to win the MLS Cup. How similar is it this season for Portland than last year? With the beginning of the season with woes, with lowering the expectation, but when it comes time, player like Valeri, Nagby stepping up with the Rudies of this world to put Portland in a position where they're almost assured 6 points ahead of that red line. How important is this run for the Timbers? Can they recreate the 2015 run?
I wouldn't bet against them. At least not yet. I mean, but the big thing that they had last year is that their run took them all the way up to 3rd and got them a home game in the knockout round. I don't know if that's going to happen this time. If it does, I really wouldn't bet against them. But that's got if they're going to make a playoff run, the key to the whole thing is getting a home game in the knockout round instead of having to go to Salt Lake City or I assume that at least that's where they ended up at Salt Lake City or Colorado, and that would be a huge difference.
Now, there's one aspect of playing soccer professionally that you're playing for is for trophies. And we have two teams, in Major League Soccer now that have a potential treble. Yes, I'm talking about 3 trophies for the same team in a calendar year. It is possible for FC Dallas, obviously, with their U.S. Open Cup win, a potential, very probable Supporter Shield win, and who knows, maybe an MLS Cup. But don't forget about Toronto, Workers' Cup winner, potential. Less probable, but potential Supporter Shield contender, and who knows what's going to happen in the playoff. Is it possible for the first time ever that a MLS team will get a treble this year?
I think it's possible. I think Dallas is certainly on course to do a double. I hate picking MLS Cup playoffs winners.
Yeah. Crapshoot at best. Yes, it's a crapshoot, but the crapshoot is part of the fun of it. True. Yeah, it's fun playing craps, I have to say.
It's not. It tests you in a very particular kind of way. And we devalue. Look, there are too many teams that make the playoffs. We know that. That's been the case for a long time. But it tests you in a very particular kind of way. And it's often very hard to say in the end that whatever team wins MLS Cup did not deserve it. And we also undervalue the Supporter Shield. I mean, yes, you get the exposure and the spotlight and probably some bonus money for winning in the playoffs, sure. But you get a CONCACAF Champions League spot for winning the Supporters Shield. And that's not nothing. And it's why everybody has stopped yelling at the Red Bulls that they've never won anything, because they've won the Supporters Shield twice, and that's enough. You know?
Yeah, true. That's a very fair point. And the Supporters Shield is the trophy for the best consistent team over 34 games, which in this league, we have a playoff system, but it is a recognition, like it is an achievement in itself.
I agree with you.
All right. One thing that's really interesting to me now is we have the Galaxy slowly racking up wins. It actually feels like the end of the season, 4 games, 5 games, 6 games left, depending on which team. It's a sprint now to the end of the season. It's the end of the run. It's the last run. It's the last 100 meter of that marathon. What is the one thing you're looking forward before the season ends, Jonathan?
From the Galaxy specifically or overall?
Overall in the league.
Those last 2 weeks of October are going to be unlike any we have ever seen in Major League Soccer's history, I think. You have on the next to last weekend of the season all of the Eastern Conference games being played at the same time, and at 3 o'clock Eastern, and then at 5 o'clock Eastern, all of the Western Conference games being played at the same time. And then on the very last day of the season, everybody plays at the same time. And it's just going to be something special. I really think so.
So people, gather your tablets, your phones, your screens, because it's going to be one crazy day on that last Sunday. It's about time that Major League Soccer went with the blueprint of usually what happens in the last day of a championship is all the team playing at the same time. So you don't necessarily pull a sandbag or anything. So literally you just play and you see where you land at the end.
Well, you say that, but it's not the standard everywhere. I don't think it's the standard in Spain in particular. It is in England. I think it is in Germany, but it's not everywhere. And you did end up in the years when Major League Soccer, especially the last couple years when Major League Soccer did not play all the games at the same time. You had this drama that sort of went in waves from game to game to game to game. And you could put 2 or 3 different ones on national television and really, craft a story that went for, 48 or 60 hours if you count Friday night. I'm not against either way of doing it. I think they both have their merits. You have to get a little lucky if you're spreading all the games out and hope that you don't have a dead one in the end.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But the last year they did it, every single game mattered. They got very fortunate there.
That's true. That's true.
And you raise the odds of every game mattering when you play them all at the same time. But the reason why they all matter is because you have playoff seeding and such things to talk about. In England, last year on the last day of the season, I think like only one of the games mattered, and it was for relegation or something like that.
That's true, because Leicester won the championship on the Monday before that with Chelsea drawing Tottenham.
Right.
No, exactly. All right. Speaking of other leagues, we'll take the last break of the show. When we come back, we will be talking about the Bundesliga. It's been a long time, and right now, there's a few players burning up that league with a lot of ties to North American soccer.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The Sweet Sounds of St. Clair. Get their EP Moving On stclair.bandcamp.com. Jonathan Christian Pulisic, U.S. men's national team wonder boy?
Oh, yes. Pennsylvania native, Eastern Pennsylvania native, too. Grew up only a couple hours from where I am in Philadelphia.
What a performance by Dortmund, 6-0. You know, when we were doing the pre-production for this show, I talked to you about the Premier League. Like, I haven't watched the Premier League this weekend. I watched Bundesliga because it was a great weekend in the Bundesliga. What did you take out of this weekend in the Bundesliga?
Well, let me start with this. I know that the English Premier League is much more popular. I know that it's not as easy to get in Canada as it is in the U.S., where Fox Sports has, they have the rights. They put a lot of games on their main TV channels, and then they make every game of the entire league available for online streaming if you want it. I didn't watch any of the Premier League this weekend, and I haven't watched any of the Premier League for a few weeks because I've just found the Bundesliga to be so much more entertaining. And I have for years. And I used to watch it, before it sort of disappeared from American TV because of rights issues for a few years.
Yeah, because Gold TV folded, yeah.
Right. But before they did, I used to watch it all the time. It's great. The crowds are huge. The technical quality of the soccer is tremendous.
The atmosphere as well.
And the atmosphere is great. Bayern Munich's going to win the title.
Yeah, basically.
But to watch an individual game, like, for example, a Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Werder Bremen, or a Dortmund Darmstadt, or like the one I watched Friday was Cologne Freiburg, which is two teams that you don't care about, but it's rip-roaringly entertaining.
Yeah, 3-0
and Hertha Berlin Schalke yesterday was entertaining. It's great soccer.
No, and there's a lot of great teams because, we're talking about Munich with Carlos Ancelotti taking over for Pep Guardiola, who now is coaching Manchester City. But great teams. We have Dortmund with their superstar Götze back with Dortmund. But how impressive was that 6-0 win over Darmstadt?
I watched every minute of it. It was terrific.
Great. What, 2 goals?
Darmstadt is not all that good, let's be clear.
No, let's face it. But you still have to make those goals. But Pulisic, 2 goals, if I'm not mistaken.
Dortmund did not have Marco Reus, Mario Götze, Andreas Schürrle. I think I'm checking now. Right. They did not have Andreas Schürrle. They did not have a couple of other of their top attacking players. Did not play. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang did not play. Marc Bartra didn't play. And they're wildly entertaining. They've got these young kids, Felix Pashlack, Julian Weigl. Ousmane Dembele is really good. Really, really good. And Christian Pulisic, who was the guy who was right in the middle of the number 10 role of the midfield. A day before his 18th birthday.
That's
and
crazy.
He had a goal and 2 assists. It's obviously Pulisic is the hot shot. Everybody, I think even in Canada at this point, folks know that.
Yeah.
But
he's a new and improved Julian Green.
Right. Well, no. Green is a different kind of player.
True. Well, I'm meaning a player that plays in Germany and has a lot of hype in a young age.
But Christian Pulisic was never told that he was guaranteed a World Cup spot in order to convince him to play for the U.S. instead of Germany. Excuse me, I should have said that.
No, but it's shots fired. But
there was never any controversy about Pulisic.
Yeah.
Kid was born in the States, went over to Europe. And look, it's I am not the kind of person who complains about dual nationals because at the end of the day, 98% of the people who watch the U.S. men's team during the World Cup don't care where they came from or whether they're the children of American servicemen or whatever, so on. If they help the U.S. win games, and they do, so that's the end of it, you know?
That's all that matters. But how important...
But
go ahead.
You look, I mean, obviously Pulisic is, you know, really the born and bred American kid. And one of the things that I really love the most about the Bundesliga is that you can look around and see so many American players who are not only playing, but as we saw on the weekend, playing very well.
There's another
Bobby
American...
Johnson, Aaron Johansson. Johansson's at Bremen. Johnson's at Borussia Mönchengladbach. Obviously, you know, Julian Green, Carlo Ancelotti likes him. Borussia Dortmund has Pulisic. Hertha Berlin has John Brooks. Ingolstadt has Alfredo Morales. They're all over the place, and they're playing well.
Is it a league that we overlook often? You mentioned, because in Canada, Sportsnet has the rights, and games are not always shown, and sometimes you need to be subscribed to Sportsnet World. But for the Bundesliga as a whole, is it overlooked even in Europe as a whole, in the UEFA process?
Oh, I don't think it's overlooked in Europe at all.
No, maybe it's I call it the old Liga syndrome, where you have one or two teams basically battling out for the championship, but it doesn't highlight the other presence. You mentioned...
I don't think so, and the reason why I don't think so is because the Bundesliga's model of financial sustainability is one that is held up as the role model for the whole of Europe. But I do think it is vastly overlooked in the United States. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is it doesn't have a globally dominant team or teams like Barcelona and Real Madrid that just rack up superstars, you know? It doesn't have an expat population in the U.S. that is so fanatically devoted the way the Italian population is to Serie A. And in particular, the Italian population has migrated into so many big cities and big media markets in the United States, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and obviously in Canada, Toronto and Montreal. And then there are two biggest things of all that the Bundesliga doesn't have. The lack of television exposure for the previous years before the current deal with Fox and Rogers really hurt it. At a time when the sport was growing and the Bundesliga could have made an impact, it wasn't able to because nobody could watch the games. That has changed now. And in that absence, as the Premier League grew, and because there are so many English expats in the US and Canada who have believed for so long that English soccer is the be-all and end-all, whether or not it actually is, and as you and I both know, it is not.
Yeah.
The received wisdom that is passed on by the television networks is this is the league in Europe that you should care about the most. They never say why.
True.
But they put it in the spotlight, and therefore people gravitate to it.
Well, it's how you promote a product, right?
Right. They had the marketing figured out before anybody else did.
You mentioned the viewership and the ratings for an MLS team, MLS ratings earlier in Canada or anywhere else. It's how you promote the product. And I'll just give you an example of Saturday night. RDS and TSN were the official broadcasters of the game on Saturday, the Impact at home. And throughout the game, the alerts on their application on phones were not concerning the Impact game. We're not concerning come and watch game, draw the viewers. No, they were concerned about giving the score of World Cup of Hockey. It's how you get behind a product. It's how NBC got behind the Premier League throughout his entire platforms.
Yeah, but they weren't first.
No.
They like to make you think that they
were
first and they weren't.
No, of course. But example, like TSN behind the CFL 15 years ago, when it decided to hype up the product, it grew literally the league, and the league became more popular in the entire country because of how they were portrayed with magazine shows, with coverage, with discussions, with hot take even. But that does generate talk, water cooler talk, right?
I can't figure out with TSN. Look, folks know, I know a number of people who work for the network. Folks also know, because you and I have discussed it on the show before, that their rights deal with MLS is going to expire at the end of the season.
Yeah.
They are going to renew it. That much is obvious because there is no way that MLS will go to Rogers.
They might go exclusive. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, They can't in Toronto.
True.
Because MLSE is jointly owned by Rogers and Bill.
But look at
They're already
TVA
exclusive in Vancouver. The question that I have is, one, since they have 5 channels, and I will remind your listeners again, they have 5 channels. Kevin, how many channels does TSN have?
5.
Okay. Now we'll ask the listeners, how many channels does TSN have? Well, no, they only have 1 or 2, right? Because, they're a region. No.
If they want, they can have 5.
They have
It
5
depends how they
channels.
set it up. Exactly.
You can put games on TSN 5 and distribute them nationwide, and it will be okay.
Yep.
And they do that sometimes. I wish they do it a little more.
They did in the weekend.
The question is, I have heard, and Kevin, you might know more about this than I do, that the Impact sponsorship with Videotron expires at the end of the season.
That's very fascinating to me.
Now, I don't know all of the details about the relationship between the Impact and Videotron. However, if TSN doesn't want to put more money on the table to MLS, which I've heard they don't, and if MLS can't convince them to televise more of the games involving the American teams, or to, bring MLS Live into TSN Go, as I've conjectured in the past that TSN ought to be able to do, so that in turn, MLS can bring the US version into ESPN streaming platform, which would be terrific. And you want to say that the deal is improved, it would seem to me the one way to do it is to make RDS the exclusive French language home of the Impact.
Well, that's where I was going, because especially if you look deep into the revenue of Québécois media, of TVA Sport, especially TVA and TVA Sport, especially TVA Sport is the one aspect of Québécois that's losing a lot of money. It's the exact opposite of the cash cow. It doesn't generate a lot of money, and it's the majority of the cost. And you're looking at a product where they really hyped soccer when they didn't have any hockey, and now that they have hockey,
they got hockey,
and they're losing money on hockey, don't even have close to the ratings that they wish they would have when they signed talk about both Sportsnet and TVA Sport here, that 1.3 billion contract a few years ago. Now when you look at TVA Sport, the rights for the Impact are coming up for grabs. You mentioned Videotron sponsorship with the Impact is coming to an end soon as well. It's probably negotiated started, but BMO as well, Bank of Montreal, has said over the last year that it's looking to change their direction of marketing and sponsorship for sports, and it's going closer to basketball in Toronto. And yes, it re-signed for 1 year for this year for BMO Field and the jersey, but it's all up for grab for next year, including the Impact. So we'll see if there's, maybe Videotron will be the new name of the Impact jersey.
I don't.
You never know.
Right, you never know, but
because it could all be the same package.
If BMO is getting out of soccer, the alarm bells to me are going off not in Toronto and with TFC in Montreal, but at the Canadian Soccer Association,
which is sponsored by CIBC, though.
Oh, they are now.
Yeah, CIBC as a Canadian level.
BMO was one of their.
It was, but at the country level, CIBC has actually really stepped up there as well.
Well, then that settles that.
Bell is the main sponsor for CSN.
Thinking about, and this is the people who work at TSN, who care about soccer, and it extends beyond the names of the people who you see on television, as folks know. They all saw what we all saw last season, which was the 2 Toronto-Montreal games, the one at the end of the regular season and the one in the playoffs, that really captured people's attention and smashed all the ratings records. And it says to me that if Toronto and Montreal make the playoffs this year, and certainly a very good Toronto team, if MLS can be smart enough to get TFC's games out of the way of the Blue Jays and out of the way of hockey, which isn't going to be all that hard given what the time slots, are.
Yeah, put on a Sunday, you're fine.
The stage is set for TFC to do some big numbers.
No, but it's fascinating to be with.
Which brings me to this. The weak link in the TSN deal is Vancouver.
Vancouver's numbers are atrocious.
They've had the most disappointing, and it makes no sense to anybody because everybody in the market knows who they are. Their corporate sponsorship revenues are some of the best in the league. The turf at BC Place is what it is, but it's smack in the middle of downtown. You can't miss it.
No, exactly.
Ads for the Whitecaps everywhere. People know they exist. The attendance is fine. In fact, it's doing even better now than people thought they would.
Yeah.
Because they're not playing too well. And nobody can figure out why nobody watches them on TV.
Again, I think it just goes behind how you get behind a product and how you make...
They've done it in Vancouver.
No, but if you... Example, there's something playing on the TV already and you have a game started, but you delay the game as a game, you start on it. It's still ingrained in the soccer fan that, it's a second... Our sport's going to be second-class citizen on those, to use an expression that was popular this week in the world of soccer. A second-class citizen...
that was a shot.
But,
that was a shot. Bang! Fired. But all the way across the board.
It's true, though. If you're looking at soccer, the example I gave you, RDS, because they wanted to give alerts before the other TV channel does, they just disregarded one product. And when that happens, it gives the habit of the soccer fans to, well, we all know that if there's something else going on, they're going to put our game on just on the web or just on the app, and that's what they need to not do. Do not create a habit, not the exact opposite. Make sure that it's always there. Friday night game, always 7 p.m. on TSN. There's a Friday night MLS game, something similar to whatever they did with Friday Night Football with the CFL.
What they've done, and they've done it in the U.S. But and I have heard that the Canadian teams want games in the afternoons that are packaged as doubleheaders with the Premier League or whatever it is. I get that. Obviously, it worked very well in the United States when NBC did it. To which I'd say, fine, go ahead and do it. The American clubs will probably thank you because they can fly home that night instead of having to stay in a hotel an extra night. But do it. Just do it.
I love our...
And they're going to go on the road and play Saturday nights on the road. That's going to happen. But if you want the home games to be in the afternoon, play them in the afternoon.
Exactly. It's fascinating, the TV landscape in MLS. I know it's one of your most favorite subjects, so we're going to talk about it, especially
tell me this before we go off the air.
Yeah.
Don't the fans want the games on Saturday nights?
They do. That's the thing. Well,
not even the front offices, because that was always the problem in MLS down here with the MLS teams. The front offices wanted the games on Saturday nights so they could sell tickets to the families, even when the hardcore fan base was much more accepting of playing games at times when the TV networks wanted them.
True.
The fans in Canada want the games on Saturday nights.
Yeah, because you can make it the one thing with a game in the middle of the afternoon, it takes your entire day. If you have to travel to get to the stadium, travel to get back, it's the entire day. If you're looking at a night game, you can leave in the middle of the afternoon, get to the stadium, you do the tailgate, call it what pregame, then your post-game, you get back home at a decent time. That's the excitement of a Saturday 7:30 p.m. game.
Well, they got to figure it out.
No, exactly. All right. We'll talk about much more in details in the off season about the TV rights in Canada. And I know it's a subject that you love talking about, so we will have you back on the show. By the way, Jonathan, you didn't know this, but you are the record holder for Two Solitudes, SPN, and Soccer Today guests. And for that, we thank you very much.
Do I get a medal? I don't even. I think I got a medal.
I can send you a mic flag.
I got a medal of some kind when I got onto the 7th podcast of Backheel that I did back in the day or something like that. Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, we'll figure that out for sure. But I want to thank you very much for doing this today, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
And until tomorrow, 11 a.m. on Soccer Today, well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.